What do? Offer them free groceries for a year? Frank always teased. Frank was a good researcher and good with contracts, with minute attention to detail, but it was always John who got all the glory, whom they asked for when they called, whom clients had heard about from miles away in other towns. Frank was an unimpressive little man, without John's charm or good looks, but they worked well together and had known each other since college. Frank stood several rows back in the church now, feeling sorry for John and his daughter. John would be all right, Frank knew. He'd land on his feet, just like he always did. And although he insisted now that he wasn't interested, Frank was betting that his partner would be remarried in a year. But it was Grace who looked absolutely distraught and shattered as she stared straight ahead at the banks of flowers at the altar. She was a pretty girl, or would have been if she'd allowed herself to be. At 17, she was lean and tall, with graceful shoulders and long, thin arms, beautiful long legs, and a tiny waist and full bust. But she always hid her figure in baggy clothes and long, loose sweaters she bought at the Salvation Army. John Adams was by no means a rich man, but he could have bought her better than that, if she'd wanted. But unlike other girls her age, Grace had no interest in clothes or boys, and if anything, she seemed to diminish her looks rather than enhance them. She wore no makeup at all, and she wore her long coppery auburn hair straight down her back, with long bangs that hid her big cornflower blue eyes. She never seemed to look straight at anyone, or be inclined to engage them in conversation. Most people were surprised by how pretty she was, if they really looked at her, but if you didn't look twice, you never noticed her at all. Even today, she was wearing an old, dreary black dress of her mother's. It hung like a sack on her, and she looked 30 years old, with her hair tied back in a tight bun, and her face deathly pale. "Poor kid," Frank's secretary whispered, as Grace walked slowly back down the aisle next to her father, behind her mother's casket. Poor John, poor Ellen, poor people. They'd been through so much. People commented from time to time on how shy Grace was, and how uncommunicative. There had been a rumor a few years back that she might even be retarded, but anyone who had ever been to school with her knew that that was a lie. She was brighter than most of them. She just didn't say much. With her mother so sick, she had barely even wanted to go to graduation. But she had, of course, and she had shown her mother the diploma as soon as she got home. She had been accepted at the University of Illinois, but had deferred it for a year so she could continue taking care of her mother. Her father wanted it that way, too. He felt that Ellen preferred Grace's loving touch to that of her nurses. Grace hadn't argued with him. She knew there was no point. There was never any point arguing with him. He always got what he wanted. He had been too good-looking and too successful for too long. He was used to it. "Couldn't you have worn something decent for a change?" her father asked with a look of irritation, as they drove to St. Mary's Cemetery on the outskirts of town, with 3 dozen cars behind them. He was a respected man, and he had a reputation to uphold. It looked strange for a man like him to have an only child who dressed like an orphan. "Mama never let me wear black, and I thought I should." She looked at him defensively, sitting miserably in the corner of the old limousine the funeral home had provided for the occasion. "Is everything ready at the house?" he asked, and she nodded. For all her shyness and reticence, she ran a home beautifully, and had since she was 13. In the past 4 years, she had done everything for her mother. "It's fine," she said quietly. She had set everything out on the buffet before they left for church, and the rest was covered on big platters in the refrigerator. People had been bringing them food for days. "She was a rare woman," John said quietly, and now, thinking of her, he glanced over at his daughter. She was such a beautiful girl, and so determined not to show it. That was just the way she was. He accepted it, and it was easier not to argue about it. She was good about other things, and she had been a godsend for him during all the years of her mother's illness. It was going to be strange for